All right, I think we'll go ahead and get going. I'm going to call the City of Mount Vernon City Council study session for October 7, 2020 to order. The time is now, I believe, 6 o'clock. And since this is a study session, we'll go right into our agenda. First up is our public safety update. And so I'll call for the approval of the September 2, 2020 Public Safety Committee minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Mary and a second by Iris. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Next up is the Police Department 2019 Annual Report Introduction and an overview of citizen engagement. And so Chief Chris Kamek is here. Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. See if, can I share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to.
It says host disabled me.
Okay, try it one more time.
All right, there we go.
All right.
Okay. Okay. So what I want to do tonight is just give a quick overview of our 2019 annual report. And some of you are probably asking, well, it's almost 2021. So why are we going over 2019 now? Unfortunately, as we developed this report always in the kind of the first quarter and first half of the year. And obviously with COVID and the other issues that went on, you know, we just weren't able to get to an agenda night like tonight to do it. So I just wanted to mention too that for people that are interested in seeing the full report, because tonight I'm just really giving a couple of highlights of the report. It is on our website and it's linked in there, and you can go to the police department webpage and download a copy or view a copy electronically. Really, the annual report for us, it just really identifies and documents those accomplishments that the police department has had. It's intended to be both an inward look at our successes and our strengths, as well as an outward measure of the effectiveness of both our policing services as well as our community partnerships. And then as you'll see towards the end of the report, it gives a glimpse of the future, both obstacles and challenges and things we're looking forward to in 2020. And so again, I need to remind you, it is a 2019 report. So some of that information in there might seem when you read it to be dated given some of the current stuff, but it's a 2019 and more of that will be covered in 2021. There's, I think, some important acknowledgement, really the successes, and our successes are really your successes. And first and foremost, for those to occur, it really takes engaged publics, and we've had a tremendous amount of community support that have lent to the outcomes that are in this report. It also takes a really committed executive, as well as a committed legislative group, and that combination of a mayor and city council that really share the vision and values of the organization are super important to where we go. And then really the service drivers and providers are our staff and our volunteer who take that vision, who take those values and apply them day to day for what you're going to see. I want to make a couple of honorable mentions because in 2019, Chief Jerry Dodd was here for the first half of the year, and Catherine Cherry was through our first quarter of the year. And they were really instrumental in our organization and in our results. I think it would be unfair to not at least mention them along the way. We had a really good year in 2019, and we had such a good year. I would rather just go ahead and do a mic drop and not do any more years, but that's not the case. If you look across the board there, the majority of our crime categories were down significantly. Aggravated assaults were down over 50%, burglary down 47%, robbery 34%. And really, the only two categories, if you will, that were up was shoplifting was up about 6%, and simple assault was up about 3%. In the annual report, you'll see actually a chart or graph that even shows the historical with the other years. And I just wanted to denote that the violent crime categories, I'll show you a graph in a minute, as well as the violent crime per thousand, which is a metrics that we track, we're down again in the 40 to 41 percentile. So we're real pleased with the quantitatives that came out of it, and then a little bit later on, you see some of the qualitatives. This just gives you a glimpse of kind of, I guess, the trending, if you will. These are the Group A offenses, which are some of the most serious ones that we investigate, and I listed a few there. As you can see, for 2019, we were down significantly, and if you look back from 2013, it's going in a good direction, and we hope that direction will continue. When you look at misdemeanor offenses, it's relatively flat across the board that's there. We were, for 2019, we were definitely down over 2018, and we remained right around the same of 2017. So I think 2021 will probably be a better indicator than 2020, looking just because we've had this COVID environment this year. And hopefully we're going to get back to some greater normalcy, but we'll see as we move into next year. Population, we just continue to grow as a community. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody here, especially with the economic development updates that come from Chris Phillips's group. But we've been trending up about a 12.5% increase since 2010. And our service calls took a 6% drop. Now, whether that is a trend line that's going to continue back down, as you can see from 2009 and 10 and 11 that was going down and then started to climb, I think it's just too early to tell. But I think that the service call data is reflective of what we're seeing also too in the drops in criminal activity that were there. This is a good sign as far as we're concerned. We like seeing population increasing while crime levels and decay are going the other direction in service calls. We recognize in this industry that as long as you have people, you're always going to have some criminal activity that's going to occur. But what we like to see is that these lines go in opposite directions. So that's a good sign for us. Mount Vernon is the county seat. We're the largest probably municipal population, so it's no surprise that when you look at calls for service as compared to other agencies, we respond to 31% of the calls in the county. And then you can see that the Skagit County Sheriff's Office, who handles the majority of the unincorporated areas and assists us from time to time, is second from there, and then the other cities. This just depicts the time of day and the day of week that our service call activity is occurring. And I highlighted the times there just to make 2 points. One is you can see the peak times are there in green. Our service calls really start up by 10 in the morning, but they're going up by 11, and that 4 to 5 time frame is usually when it starts to peak and go down. But I don't want to lose sight of that midnight till often 3 in the morning. Even though the call levels are going down, the types of calls that are coming in tend to be 2 and 3 officer details at times. So when you look at staffing, and we're talking about staffing deployment, just because we have calls going down at night doesn't necessarily mean that we can reduce our staff at those hours and put them during the peak. So that's some of the challenges that we have when we're actually doing deployment. And then day of the week, it stays pretty steady Monday through Friday. And then there's a little bit of a reprieve there on the weekend. But again, you got to look at the mix of what types of calls are there before you judge your staffing levels. This is our top 25 calls for service. And I colored it intentionally because I think it's important to reflect really the multidiscipline approach that we have to responding to these. In the green are calls that can tend to have more of a human service component to it, whereas the ones in blue tend to have a crime or investigation related. It doesn't mean that those human service calls there don't have a need to have a commissioned officer present, but we have community service officers, animal control, park rangers, and outreach coordinators all in place for a reason, because these calls can be addressed and handled and investigated and resolved by non-traditional resources like these. This just gives you a little bit of composition of our offender profile. So 18 to 44 range there is based off of arrest data. And then on the ethnicity side, based off of arrest, this is where it falls. If you look at when I look specifically at the ethnicity graph, one of the things I like to point out to people is sometimes when you compare that to our population, the census population that's there in the Black or African American or the American Indian, Alaskan Native, or even the Asian, those numbers can appear to be off a little bit when you compare it. But one thing to remember is that like we have reservation lands around that don't get included in the census. We have a military base that's in Oak Harbor, and we have I-5 corridor that's connecting, Vancouver, BC, all the way down to the Washington state border. So we get a lot of travelers that come through here and things like that that don't go into some of our census data that compare it. So I like looking at like our Hispanic or Latino comparisons, because I think our census on that runs about 35%. So feel good about where those figures are landing. Just accident data. This is a pretty frequent call for us, as you can see. 10 a.m. till around 7 p.m. or really I guess 5 p.m. at peaks, and it drops off. But the reason I have those highlighted in green is that's where we're staffed for our traffic enforcement and education right now. And then you can see on the days of the week where our accident picture comes in. Our approach to all of this to get to our results and things like that really comes back to these four strategic principles. And I've talked about these before, that idea that, we will never have the resources to do this work completely on our own. And we rely heavily on sharing those responsibilities with the community and exchanging ideas and being adaptive in how we're doing it, and really being more focused on the crime prevention than the crime response that's there. These are the 5, if you will, driving strategic priorities. Again, crime prevention being that central operating strategy, really looking at bolstering crime-resistant barriers in our neighborhoods, in our business areas, and those are our Business Watch and our Block Watch groups that are there. Building the community's capacity to really understand what goes into crime causes, to equip them with tools to address that. When we have emergency or emerging issues, being responsive to those, not only in timeliness, but in effectiveness as well. And then, this is a people industry, and it's about highly qualified and competent staff to get that done. Success, what's success? I like hitting on this just because I think sometimes we can lose sight of, especially when we look at graphs and call loads and things like that, of, are we getting there? What is success? So for us, obviously, we would love when we go out to an emerging problem that we eliminate it altogether. But we know that some of these problems are driven by really hard issues, mental health, substance abuse, poverty, racism. I mean, there's just so many things that can go into that eliminating it altogether just isn't realistic. So we look at other measures to really define whether we've been successful both in our programs and our approaches. So, if we can reduce the problem to fewer incidents, if we can look at a category of crime calls and we change the harm rate in that and we reduce it, we consider that success. If we improve the way that we handle the incidents, and I think our outreach coordinator and our park ranger are 2 really good examples of that. We improve the way that we handle those calls, so those calls might still be there in volume, hopefully reduce them, but we're handling them in a more improved way. Another new one that's just coming on board that some of you are hearing about is our community court program. And so Commissioner Housen was here recently and was just talking about how officers can cite directly into community court. And I hope an opportunity in the future here to bring that presentation to you all if you haven't seen it, because that's a really exciting thing. And then again, that removing the problem from the criminal justice system and putting it in the appropriate system. So just wanted to give you some real quick highlights as far as, you know, again, the more of the qualitative, what goes into making those results happen. I think this speaks for itself, but we rely so heavily on our citizen volunteers. And, you know, you can see there that over, you know, 7,500 hours these individuals put in for our community in 2019, and $200,000 in value is what that equates to. And this last year, we honored Eileen Beitler, who has put in 20 years as a volunteer for us and over 3,500 hours. And she's the first recipient of the Gold Star Volunteer Award. So there won't be many people, those that do really deserve the distinction. Erin is busy every single day. And what I like that she's helped provide in this year's report is that depiction of the system that's up there in that kind of flowy, what looks like a trail system. And so when you go into the annual report, I really encourage you to look through each one of those steps, but that's a flow through of what can happen with an individual. And this was one person's path through the system over, I think, 1 year, 2 year period. And then again, we highlight some of the work that she's doing there with the number of contacts, working on behalf of the clients, helping them get into housing and substance abuse services, obtaining driver's licenses to be able to drive and perhaps get back employed. And there's just so much assistance related things. And I think when you look at these types of accomplishments that are occurring, and then you go back and you look at service call loads as well as crime rates, I think the connections are pretty obvious. Our annual coat drive is just another example of some of the things we did. This year we're going to do a little bit different, and I'd like to just do an advertising plug for Friday, October 23rd, which is our 4% Friday. So a lot of service clubs, community action are doing a coat drive. So we've done it for the last several years, and this year we're going to do a more direct fundraising effort that will go to support Erin's outreach needs and supplies. So the 4% Friday is Skagit Valley Food Co-op will apply 4% of their sales on Friday, October 23rd, and that will be a direct donation. And so we're going to use the month of October and do fundraising that will go to our outreach coordinator. We accomplished a good year with the citizen engagement piece, graduates from our Citizens Academy program, as well as our preparatory academy program. Operations talk, I think this is another one of those areas that really is a direct connection to the results. Operations talk is a monthly come together between all the divisions in the police department, code enforcement, parks, city attorney's office. Arn Denny sits in on those available. And we go through every community zone in the city, and we look through what's occurring, service calls. So there were 75 action items that were completed in 2019 through Operations Talk. And there's just a few glimpses, if you will, of the before and after from their results. And so that's, you know, patrol, detectives, crime prevention, records. It's a very effective way to get things done. Wellness, the highlight that I want to do here is we're researching a peer support program internally within the office. Some of the existing wellness resources we already have is a critical incident stress management team, the employee assistance programs that the city offers. We also have these critical incident stress tip sheets that we do really post-incident that will flood around the office so people can remind themselves of some of the normal reactions that are going to go through. But the peer support was kind of researched and proposed in 2019, and it came into fruition in 2020. So hope to speak more on that this next go around with the annual report, but it's just another mechanism to really try to address wellness for our folks in this industry. Training hours, again, people are asking about that these days. We had over 7,000 training hours for our staff. We thank you for that, council and mayor, because it's not possible for us to attain that if it's not funded. And you can see the types of development training that have gone on there in the annual report. I wanted to speak just really briefly too about Narcan or naloxone that came in. I think Greg Booth came and did a presentation in 2019, but just glancing down to the bottom 3 bullets there, again, this is a medication that we carry that temporarily blocks the effects of opioids. And this is just a couple of the examples there where we were actually out and were able to apply the Narcan, if you will, and it led to a recovery. Can't not acknowledge, the fire and the aid who were also there, who stepped in and did the resuscitating portions of that to add. But this is just another capability, again, that's now available. 2020, again, just kind of looking forward a little bit. Expanding our outreach services, and that's the internship program that we've been talking about. And we're actually bringing on another intern, it looks like, here soon, and a couple more in the hopper. We're making adjustments to our priority policing model and incorporating with Skagit County on their PROACT team. And so we're going to look at doing some partnershiping there and see if we can do a little bit better resource utilization. Unfortunately, Park Ranger Kevin, he got on his own right when COVID hit, and then all the parks shut down. So we really like to see the next building blocks for the parks enrichment piece in next year for sure. And then on the records, we're working through filling that staffing position in order to get to the backlog. And we've been working on researching and looking at implementing a barcoding in our property area. And then again, the continued commitment to hiring and training, because it reflects on the commitment that we can put into our neighborhood zones that are there. And before I transition to the next topic, is there any questions about the annual report?
Any questions from council? Again, reminding not only council, but the entire community that this is something that's done every year. It's found online. Anyone can access it at any time, and really encourage people to take a look at that. Okay.
So there's been some letters that have come into council the last few meetings and really talking about citizen engagement. And so I thought I'd just give a quick overview of where the citizens' role lies within Mount Vernon Police Department. And I think, really just from the standpoint of what that oversight, looks like within our organization. I think first it's important to remind folks that when you take a look at our belief systems, that the idea of community engagement is really ingrained in our beliefs in how really effective policing can work. And this may not be, community policing principles may not be prescribed in every community by every police department. So I think it's important to distinguish that up front, because it then leads to all of the different ways that we have tried to incorporate them into what we do. It's embedded in our policies that the community is part of what we do. It's stated right up front that they must be involved in the delivery of our service, that we can't be successful in achieving our mission without their support and involvement. So within our policies, and then also within our values, we have 8 organizational values. 2 of those values directly speak to the importance of the community's role and involvement in the delivery of service. If you take a look in our annual report at our staffing chart, you may or may not have noticed that citizens sit at the top of the hierarchy, because ultimately that's who we serve, and we reflect that in the staffing chart as well. You all as council play an important citizen role in our policing. Obviously, you have budget oversight in what you're going to fund and support. And public safety meetings like this, where you're understanding the operations and asking questions, and the constituents that have put you in that place are reaching out to you as well. So there's an oversight function that we recognize the council plays. Obviously, Mayor Boudreau, who's the chief executive of the city, and managing personnel and operations, and does oversight of the police department, oversight of my role in the police department that's there. On the hiring, selection, and even promotions and advancement, there's a number of different civilian positions or citizen positions that are there. First of all, the Civil Service Commission is a 3 civilian panel, and they're there specifically to, curb political favoritism, remove coercive pressures, really make sure that it's a fair, competitive process for people coming through. The Civil Service Examiner is a civilian position. In this case, Erin Cater, our HR director, fills that spot. So you have somebody who is specialized in human resources issues that's overseeing the hiring, selection, and promotion practices that are there. On our interview panels for all of our police positions, but specifically police officers, we have a civilian that typically sits in a chair there, and they provide that non-police perspective as we're selecting individuals to come to work. In both our internal affairs policy as well as our Mount Vernon Police Services Guild contract, there's specific language about citizen review, and it speaks to 2 qualified community members who are of high professional ability and reputation. And when there's allegations of misconduct involving death or grievous injuries, civil rights violations, corruption, theft, dishonesty, or a breach of ethics, these citizen members can be involved in that review, and they're advisors to the chief of police, and they look at whether there needs to be further investigation or if there needs to be specific clarification prior to the finalizing of the investigative report. The independent police shooting investigations. Again, I spoke of this a few weeks ago, but as a reminder, it's required by law under Initiative 940 that there is citizen representation. So currently there are 6 qualified community members who are of high professional ability and reputation that are a part of that. They represent Skagit and Island communities. They sit in a role to review conflicts of interest with investigators. They attend briefings between the independent police shooting investigation team and the involved agency. They review information that is released to the public. They also review if an agency is going to need to use their own equipment in a case to make sure that there's not a conflict of interest in doing that. There's 2 other components that were tied to this as well, and they're a family and a tribal liaison, and the idea there is that ensuring that the independent police shooting investigation team is sensitive to the cultural differences that can go on depending on who the involved is, as well as the family, that second layer out, if you will, from the individual who's involved, who may not have had any direct role or cause in it, and how that information is being relayed and transferred. And at the end of the day, this is about communication and understanding and trust. So these are additional citizen roles within our policing efforts here. So just a quick example of what it would look like if we had say a police in custody death and there was an allegation or an appearance that there was criminal, ethical, civil rights, or misconduct involved. First and foremost, there'd be an independent investigation team. So the Skagit MultiAgency response team would be requested to investigate that. Mount Vernon police personnel would not be a part of that investigation. And again, there would be 2 citizen representatives that would be overseeing that with the team. Their findings would get a criminal conduct review from the Skagit County Prosecutor's Office, or the Skagit County Prosecutor's Office would coordinate if they felt there was a conflict in them reviewing it, and coordinate with whatever prosecutor's office would be appropriate, typical Snohomish County or Whatcom County. And again, public disclosure laws cover that information. And then once those steps are completed, there's administrative review processes. And there's two of those. One's a use of force review and the other one's an internal affairs review. And the reason I make that distinction is even if there isn't an allegation or an appearance that there's misconduct involved, just the mere fact of a police in custody death or a police use of force death would trigger a review. And then if during that review, an appearance of a violation of misconduct came out, it could switch over to then an internal affairs process. But again, there would be citizen oversight of those allegations of that serious misconduct. On a wellness role, so again, going back to critical incident stress management teams, these teams are assembled following events where there could be trauma. They don't always have to be really serious, high-profile events. It could be a traffic accident with a death involved. It could be an assault. It could be a variety of different things. It really is just dependent on the circumstances. But the specialists who come to those debriefings, although at times there's fire or police representative on there, many of those debriefers are civilians. They hold civilian positions, but they have a background in trauma and working with individuals in trauma. And there's usually also a psychologist who's either directly involved or can be referred to. So this goes to assessing our mindset. And then there's communication with the agency about that as well, and there's follow-on services. Within our police operations, going back to our Citizens Academy program, we dedicate an entire class to this accountability discussion that we have. We've had almost 700 graduates through the program. Currently, there's over 50 of those graduates that are active in the police department. So those individuals are in our roll calls. They attend those operations talks I mentioned earlier. Labor and Industries requires the city to have a safety committee. On our police department safety committee, we have a citizen volunteer who's on that. When we have incident debriefs that they're involved in, they're part of those. So again, citizen roles are intertwined every day within our operations. Our advisory, well, let me back up. Our COPP program, our Citizens on Proactive Patrol, there's even an advisory board within that kind of develops policies and practices and procedures for our volunteers. And so we kind of sit in as a observer to that, and they govern our volunteers. They also make suggestions and recommendations for that program. And these would all be individuals that if there were issues that they saw within staff anywhere, and it wouldn't have to even be a commissioned officers, I believe fully would bring that to the attention of the police department to look into. So citizen role within Mount Vernon Police Department, it covers a number of things. There's citizen's role in police conduct, in independent shooting investigation teams. Again, on our safety committee, we have a volunteer advisory board. The mayor and city council have a role. We have citizen volunteers that work every day with our folks within our wellness and our critical incident stress management. And obviously in our hiring and promotion processes, there's citizen roles in all of those. So I think for the Mount Vernon Police Department, citizens are definitely a part of and not apart from the department itself. And again, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions from council? And I think all of you are very well versed. Many of you have been through Citizens Academy. You really know this information. I asked Chief to do this so that we could post the video on our website to help answer questions. So, okay. If there's no questions, thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.
And then we'll move on to our fire station exhaust systems update. And Fire Chief Brian Bryce is here to talk through that. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So just to follow up, this was a committee request a couple weeks ago. So if you remember back to last year's budget piece, there was a dialogue about needed equipment and pieces, and we had a lot of facilities dialogue. And one of those came back to some of the needs for safety, and that was the exhaust system. So within the budget, we had placed an item for the vehicle exhaust using some funds from the fire impact, and then also some from the general fund to fund that for Station 3 at that point in time. As we move forward, so the update is pretty short with regards to what have we done was the question. We haven't gotten anything done with regard to getting that in place. If you look at the timeline, we were just getting those funds. We were just going to start that work, and then we got hit with the COVID piece in March. And while I know a lot of it looks like it was shut down at the end of March, we started dealing with COVID actually back in February when some of those first cases were reported through the nation, and then through down there in Everett area. Yeah, through Everett locally. And so we started working on that. After that, then there was kind of just a budget freeze with regard to that. So we've really put it on the back burner on twofold. One, because of workload associated with making sure we have plans in place for the COVID piece of that. And then secondly, with the budget freeze. But what we have been able to do is we've been able to kind of look anecdotally at a couple different options. One of those is an exhaust system that would be placed in the stations. And then the other system is one that could attach to the apparatus itself. The concern, one of the pieces we still need to vet through just a little more cleanly is the ones with regard to the apparatus, making sure it doesn't void any warranties for the new engines or vehicles going forward, and then how and what might that impact with regard to performance for that. We don't believe it will, but again, not being the expert in that, that's something we want to engage with Gary and then also the manufacturers of the vehicles to make sure we don't inadvertently do something, but that may be another option. So the plan moving forward, for this year is still, we're still in the budget hold because those funds were needed to balance the budget for this year, those that were associated with the general fund. But we're definitely going to look to move forward then with doing an RFP or proposal piece to look at the different costs for the station system and then also the vehicle system. And that way then we'll have concrete numbers on the differences between those systems before we make a final determination. Knowing that we have the funding associated with the station one, we believe the vehicle one, while I don't have numbers exactly on that, the anecdotal information is that should be less, that may incorporate more of the vehicle. That's the quick down and dirty update for that, and happy to answer questions as we move forward.
We also have some more decision making through our budget process, which we'll get to in just a little bit, and as that we talk through that in the next month. But any other questions?
Just to clarify, so that's an RFP that's coming up pretty quickly that would give us that kind of information. Is that right? Is that what I heard?
Well, I don't know if it would be very quickly. It is, and I'm not fully sure whether it needs to be a complete RFP or just at least get the companies that provide that service. Again, I kind of look at this and say, I want to make sure that we don't award this to some company and exclude another one and not be as transparent and as free with any kind of quote unquote government contract. Again, I'm still trying to learn all those rules. I think it's a little bit easier here. It's not as strict as some other places, but I still want to make sure that we've gotten good pricing from multiple companies on what is the best price we could get for those systems, both on the apparatus side and then on the station facility side.
But so you're actively researching and looking into procurement and giving options back, it sounds like. So thank you, that answers my question.
Okay, any other questions about that? Okay, great, thank you. Thank you, Chief. Okay, we're gonna move on then to item B tonight is our CARES Act Increased Funding and Extension Amendment. And we've got a few items that I'll kind of coordinate together. So we'll take this one first. Finance Director Doug's here. Doug.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, council members. So tonight, staff recommends that council authorize the mayor to enter into an amended agreement with the Washington State Department of Commerce for the federal coronavirus relief funds. Through the coronavirus relief funds, the CRF, the CARES Act provides for payments to state, local, and tribal governments navigating the impact of COVID-19 outbreak. The city of Mount Vernon has been previously awarded funds for the CRF in the amount of $1,072,200. Additional funding is now available, and the city has been awarded an additional $536,100, bringing the new contract amount to $1,608,300. The CRF also extended the use of these funds for costs incurred by local governments in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency during the period of March 1st, 2020 through November 30th, 2020. All final requests for reimbursements must be submitted to the Department of Commerce no later than December 15th of 2020. Again, the intent of these funds is to help jurisdictions cover the immediate impact of the COVID-19 emergency and both direct costs to the jurisdictions and costs to their communities. So staff recommends that council authorize the mayor to enter into this amended agreement with the Washington State Department of Commerce for federal coronavirus relief funds.
Okay, any questions for Doug on this?
I would move the council authorize the mayor to enter into the amended agreement with the Department of Commerce.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Mark and a second by Gary. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. Item C tonight is the 2020 General Fund Budget Amendment. And again, Doug will present.
All right. Again, this is all these tonight are kind of all related here, but so tonight staff is requesting council to approve an ordinance to amend the 2020 general fund budget to account for additional awarded coronavirus relief funds and care reimbursements. As I previously said, the city of Mount Vernon was awarded additional $536,100 and you just approved in a contract amendment, bringing that new contract amount to $1.6 million. These revenues received in 2020 were not included in the 2020 general fund budget, and the city is requesting to amend the 2020 general fund budget by increasing the revenues and expenditures appropriations as follows. $536,100 for the coronavirus relief funds to request reimbursement for the council approved spending plan of COVID-19 related expenditures. So with that, city staff recommends council approve the ordinance and for the 2020 general fund budget amendment.
Okay, and this would be Ordinance 3813. Is there questions for Doug on this?
I move to approve Ordinance 3813. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mary and a second by Melissa. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you so much. All right, now moving on to item D, which is the additional CARES Act funding plan. Peter's done a ton of work on this, and so I'm going to ask him to lead this off, and then we'll go from there. So, Peter.
All right, happy to do that. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. All right, can you confirm that we're up and running there?
There you go.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And hello to council. So before we talk about the spending plan, just a quick rewind on what the coronavirus relief funds are, because it feels like there's a lot of funds from maybe different sources that are coming through the city. This is just a quick recap of where those are coming from. So you'll remember earlier in the pandemic, there was the initial approximately $1 million for coronavirus relief funds that came through the CARES Act. The city of Mount Vernon was recently awarded that additional $536,000. And so this would be a motion to amend our current contract, combining those two amounts, so to a total of $1.6 million. And also with that came the change that initial funding was had to be spent by the end of October, and this extends that deadline to the end of November. So the spending plan that's being proposed with that $536,000 in additional funds, as well as $150,000 that's been reallocated from the previous plan, looks like this. The The staffing increases, the outdoor kiosk, the remodel costs, those are all items that the city's identified as ways that we need to respond to the coronavirus emergency. And then, as council knows, there were some additional funds that you really wanted to see impact our community. And so that's what we're going to talk about briefly here tonight. The small business grants, we're proposing that council look at just a little bit over 300,000 for that. And also, council indicated that you would like to address sort of the urgent needs in our community and maybe directly fund some of our nonprofits who are addressing those basic human needs. So we found a way we can do that to the tune of $150,000. So again, a little bit of a review here. CARES Act funding coming to the city through two different sources, although all of it is tied to the federal CARES Act. It's coming to the city through CDBG CV funds, and it's coming to the city through the Department of Commerce CARES funding. So we're talking about CARES funding tonight. And this is a glimpse of where council has directed some of that money to date. The micro enterprise, the small business grants that you did earlier this year, that was CDBG CV1, the first round of CDBG funding. You also did rental assistance with that to $100,000. And then we've learned just recently from a letter from HUD that an additional amount of about $260,000 will be coming to the city to pass through again, and council will need to determine at that time what to do with those CV round 3 funds. So tonight, talking about the CARES funding. With this, you've done $30,000 along with Community Action. You've contracted with them for motel vouchers, and the plan that we'll look at is how the rest of that will be allocated. I've had the opportunity in the last couple of weeks to speak with a lot of nonprofits in our area, about 20, 22 of them, and had a chance to find out what the needs are currently. And there are a lot of them, and it's probably a good thing that there are funding sources coming through the city and the county to address a lot of those needs. In front of you right now is how we would recommend maybe looking at that 150,000 and where that could make the biggest impact on basic human needs right now in the city of Mount Vernon. Utility bill assistance, 40,000, Helping Hands Food Bank and Neighbors in Need Food Bank. Food was identified as one of the greater needs right now, and food services. They have a lot of challenges getting food to people right now, where people are either have to stay at home or they have concerns about being in public. They need creative ways to get that food to people. So those would be 2 welcomed grants by those organizations. The Diaper Bank of Skagit County does some really great work, and in your notes that you have in the council packet, I talk a little bit about what kind of impact that could make to them as they support a lot of childcare programs right now and fill in a big need in Skagit County. Skagit Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, $10,000 is the recommendation as their services have increases. And like so many nonprofit organizations right now, they have not been able to fundraise or have fundraising events. And that was one thing that almost all of these organizations had in common. They lost the ability to have their large group fundraisers. So that was a big hit to their bottom line. Oasis Teen Shelter and Day Center is run through YMCA, and Friendship House you know a lot about, as well as Family Promise. They've got some great programs where they're really working closely with families and mentoring families through some difficult transitions. So that is our recommendation for direct nonprofit support. And we also talked about the small
Peter?
business help. Yes,
Sorry, before we go forward, can you go back to the last slide?
I can.
Okay, thanks. So I know that when we first showed a slide to you last week, we talked about the 300,000 for small business grants. What we've been doing literally every single week is tracking the expenditure of the CARES funding that we had asked council to spend on city needs a few months ago. One of those was our city liability for unemployment. And so, as you know, we laid off folks and we had folks that were on extended furloughs. And so you don't really know until you get billed by unemployment, what our liability is there. We felt that we were ultra conservative in the number. We estimated around 300,000 in that liability. And so in the last bill that we just received, we don't think we're going to be anywhere near that. And so that's why you're seeing the $150,000 as the recommendation to go to nonprofit supports. And then as Peter gets done with this, anything that we believe that won't be expended by a specific date in November, we would want to then, allocate anything that the city can't get to what we wanted to spend that on, or needed to spend that on, I should say, then that would go directly back into the community funds, whether it goes to any nonprofit support or just into the small business grant funding. So just a quick explanation of what that is before we move on. So, questions, Mary? Did you have one?
Yes, thank you very much. I have a question. Can you tell me who's going to monitor the utility bill assistance, how that's going to work?
Okay, so this actually came to us directly from the PUD. George Sadu, the executive there, gave a call and said they're having folks that are having some issues paying their utility bill. And so I asked if he could get some very specific numbers of customers in the city of Mount Vernon. And so he came back with around this $40,000 number. What he did was he looked at the accounts that were not in arrears as of March 1st, just to sort of identify if they were, COVID affected. And so there could still be definitely some further screening on that, but this is just a kind of a round figure. What we want to try and do, and what Peter's been working on over the last several days is, how can we distribute that funding? There are these ties to how the CARES Fund and how Department of Commerce and the federal government want that reporting. And so it could be either specifically to a person that has a bill, or it could be in the form of a grant in a lump sum. And so we're trying to find out the easiest way to get this distributed, the quickest way to get this distributed. So we haven't figured out the details yet. But we did, I believe Peter's had some conversation with Community Action. If they're not able to assist us, we'll figure out how to do it. Even if we have to do it ourselves through City Hall.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, questions, because we're going kind of fast. So is there questions before we move forward, and then we'll get the whole picture? Okay, great, thanks. Go ahead, Peter.
All right, thanks, Mayor. Thanks for catching that. It's good to know where extra money might be coming from. You see it on paper. So for the small business grants, the just over 300,000, we talked about awards being based on business size. So this is the criteria for those small business grants. And we also talked about opening those up to nonprofits, as well as nonprofits have overhead and operations expenses and have also been impacted by COVID. So, as I was talking with other nonprofits, certainly there are others who were impacted that weren't addressed in that first list, and it would be wonderful if they had the opportunity also to compete with small businesses for these awards. So, based on business size at $2,000 per employee, full-time employee, with a $25,000 maximum award is what I heard after council discussion at your last meeting. And open to any small business or nonprofit, 25 or fewer full-time employees. So that's how we'll define small business. And in business prior to March 1, impacted, of course, by COVID, and then locally owned and managed would have priority for these applications. Any questions about criteria?
These are just recommendations, so.
No, I think you pretty well nailed what council had discussed last week. I guess the week before.
Okay. This is Richard. Same. Nice job. Thank you so much for all the work you both, and I'm sure others have been doing. So these are sort of the get in the door criteria. And then we assume that there would be more people applying, more groups of businesses applying than we have funding for. So how would they prioritize it? Is still EDASC we're talking about?
Yes, the idea would be that EDASC would administer this process so that it's separate from the city. That's what I heard from council from the discussion, that just might be a better way to go all the way around.
I guess my question is sort of specifically, this gets them in the door, but then how do you find differences between the applicants? Is it going to look at the severity of impact? Is it going to look at the number of jobs that would be saved?
That's a good question. The criteria that the applicants would need to not just demonstrate that they have need, but demonstrate to what extent that need exists. So that will all be considered in the application process and looked at by a committee that EDASC selects.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? This is the timeline that we would propose for this grant application process. So starting tonight and then moving really quickly, getting things going hopefully next week, and having a final decision by that first week or so of November, and checks to businesses before the holidays. So by mid-November, I think is the goal. Questions on the timeline?
Peter, I just want to say I don't have a question on the timeline. I think that you have done a fabulous job in terms of with the nonprofits. You know, it's a diverse group of nonprofits. We're trying to hit the basic urgent needs, and I really think you've done a good job. What I'm curious or question about is, I want to make sure that is there a timeline that if we grant this money to organizations that it gets to the neediest in our community as quickly as possible? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know if that's
Yes.
a conversation we need to have with council. I just want to make sure if we're awarding this money that it gets into the hands that it needs to get to as soon as possible. So I just want to make sure that organizations have the capacity to get that money where it needs to go.
Gotcha. Yes, so along with this, we've discussed capacity, because with all of this increased needs, that is another common thread. Everyone is sort of maxed, right? So the question, can you spend this and get it to our residents in time, is a really important one. And we feel very comfortable with those that we've listed, and follow up on one, maybe two, will clarify just those. But yes, I would say by and large, we're going to be able to make a good impact this year, in November, December.
And I think too, Melissa, thank you for asking that. We're going to make sure that when we want to make sure that happens. And so my statement of, if we have to do it ourselves, I mean it. We will pull employees in to make this happen, for our community. It's urgent. And so, it's an emergency, and we'll do what it takes to get that funding out. So the city of Marysville is an example of doing it themselves out of their finance department, where they were able to help 98 families with rental grants, and I think around the same amount of small business and around the same amount of utility customers. So we will make sure that all that money goes out as quick as we can.
I'd just like to thank the mayor and Peter. I know you did a lot of work on this. A couple weeks ago, we had a pretty in-depth conversation about where we'd like to see the money go, and where in the community it would best serve. And I think you guys have done an excellent job of putting this plan together.
Thanks. Peter spent a lot
Thank
of
you.
time on the phone. He did include his notes today in your council packet if you'd like to see who he contacted and what they said. So just know that that's there too.
So if there's no further discussion, I'd like to move approval of this spending plan.
Second.
I do have one thing I'd like to bring up.
Okay. Motion by Mark and a second by Mary. So go ahead, discussion, Richard.
Great, thank you. So I mentioned this last 2 weeks ago, I guess, when we last met, and I feel that the kiosk new pay station that's proposed outside of City Hall is not an immediate need that's going to have as much impact as the economic relief grants to small businesses would. So we could go into that in a little bit more detail. We do have an existing manual pay station outside the City Hall and are able to accept utility payments at that facility. The new kiosk would provide, it's a much nicer system, obviously. It would provide the ability to use credit cards, which we don't currently allow at that station, at that kiosk, and would be in multiple languages, which is nice, and could be done after hours. I guess the current one could be after hours too. The other thing is it provides some efficiencies for staff because it would automatically update who's paying what and would relieve some of the staff workload. These sound like great things to support. But I feel like it's not an immediate, not as an immediate and as impactful as the other grants that we're giving, as the grants we're giving out. So I'd prefer to see that proposal increase the 300,000 to 385,000 and do more support. I just feel like we should be not working on equipment. We should be working on people, and this is a big crisis, and we need to get more of these resources out.
Any other discussion? Okay. So there is a motion and a second. So Mark, you're gonna have to help me. If there is an amended motion, or do we vote on this one?
Well, there's been no amendment made on this, so if Richard would like to make an amendment, he could, and then that amendment would require a second. Then we would vote on the amendment, and then we would vote, if that was approved, then we'd vote on the amended motion. If that does not pass, then we'd vote back on the original motion.
Got it. Okay.
And I don't need to make an amendment if there's only two or three of us that feel that way. I don't want to create any contention in any way, shape, or form. Just my perspective on it. I know some others and I have talked about that as well, but I don't know if the majority feels that way.
I am in the same way too, because I have seen so many needs we have in the community, small business. We have seen many businesses being closed, and we have seen many people being losing jobs. Then I think this is something like it's a crisis in the community. Probably we need to see more the money goes to the crisis we have in the community. That's my feeling. And we have seen so much needs, and people are on unemployment. People are losing the jobs, and many small businesses are closing because of the crisis. And I don't know if it's going to hurt anybody, just to find the way how to use wisely those funds.
Okay. Other thoughts? If there's anyone else that is interested in changing that plan? I don't see anyone else. So it seems like, oh, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, just maybe, is there another way to pay for the kiosks through utility funds? I know it's not currently budgeted, but there's multiple utilities that would benefit. And so is there some way to use a little bit of funding from each of the utility funds to cover this cost?
Well, go ahead, Jill.
So I would say, Doug, there is, there's, I believe, and just if yes or no, Doug, I think there is ways to use utility funds. It's not planned for a capital expenditure in the rate utility calculations. And so yes, the answer is yes, that there is another way.
Yes, you're right, Mayor. There is another way we could do that. You're Councilmember Brocksmith, you're right, though. It's also, they're not budgeted right now, so we would have to do a budget amendment for the utilities. And then, again, then that cost would be burdened onto their rates. And at this point, we could do that.
Mark,
I think this kiosk is a great asset to the community. It's going to benefit a number of people. It also allows people to do business with the city at all day or all times of the day. There's a lot of folks in our community that sometimes have a struggle to get in during business hours. So I think long term, this is a great asset to the city and to the taxpayers. My concern with using other funds at this point in time, every time we look at those utility funds and we say, oh, we can buy this with that, or we can spend some of it here, we can spend some of it there, we continue to bring down the fund balance of that. And we've got mechanisms in place that if we draw those funds down too far, now we've got to go look at rate increases, which impacts everybody, to get those, I want to say, those balances back to where they need to be. So I think this is actually an appropriate use of these funds.
Then is that kiosk is really in a big need for us to get it into the city? Is because it's a high need to have that kiosk in the community? It is.
Well, I would say this. So we've laid off a full-time staff member in the finance department, specifically a utility customer service that processes payments and, it greets people at the counter. And because City Hall's been closed, we've been able to, keep up with that. We do not intend to replace that position. And so this actually helps out in the staffing of our finance department and allows folks to make their business with the city in cash, credit card at any time of the day. So while I believe that if we look at the total number of dollars that are going into the community for community need from the city itself, but also from Skagit County, from the other avenues that folks are able to get assistance, whether it's through nutrition programs through the state and things like that, and private donations. I think it is a need for the city. And it's important that we support our staff who have really saved $1.5 million from the budget through unpaid furloughs and layoffs. So I feel it's a need.
Mayor, can I also add something?
Go ahead, Iris.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, I was going to ask what is going to happen with the kiosk after the time comes back in normal? What is going to... If people are going to continue using it, is going to be a need still for the community to have that kiosk?
Yep, it's still there. It would be right out in front of City Hall, and people could continue to use it for convenience, and also not having to come in, to the building itself. Doug, we have 14,000 utility bill customers, I think, or 9,000. You're gonna have to remind me.
About 14,000.
So we have 14,000 customers. So think of it as a service of one of our small businesses of utilities. We're serving 14,000 customers, so they have that ability to use it, from now forward.
And I think I asked last week how many people use the current kiosk that's there now and available 24 hours a day.
I think Doug's got some of that information.
Yeah, we have, hold on a second here. Let me find that. So right now, or prior to COVID, we had about 1,035 transactions monthly from in-house payments. And those include the Dropbox also. There's about 685 of those which were cash payments. We have a number of of customers that come in with cash, that to pay for cash, and then about 100 checks, and then also about another 250 that are in the drop box. Currently, right now, we aren't accepting any in-house payments, so we do receive about an estimated 500 plus transactions monthly in the drop box. One of the things that we have been hearing a lot of issues or concerns with is that it's a burden to all these cash customers because they have to go get money orders because they don't want to put cash in the drop box. We do still get some cash in the drop box, but the majority of these people they go and have to go purchase a money order and then pay their bills that way. So we've been hearing some concerns, about that. We know that's a burden on them, and so the kiosks, they'll take the cash, credit cards, and whatever. We've also talked to many of other cities that were using it and stuff, and most of them, as people use them once, that's what they do. They just keep coming back. It's so much easier than standing in line in City Hall, and they can go after hours or whenever. A lot of our customers can't come during work hours. They struggle with that. So I think it would be a big benefit for the city.
Joe, if I may talk, looking back on our last meeting, I think we're getting a little bit off where we should be, because it wasn't, from my vantage point, it wasn't a question of whether it was the right thing to do. It was, how are we going to pay for it, and if it's going to come out of the CARES money or if it's going to come out of the rate money. I didn't see any question about whether this was a good thing to do or not. So I feel it is a good thing to do. I really, we do have money available for it, and I would sooner use that coming out of the CARES than going out of, and then possibly having to raise utility rates down the road.
Okay. There is a motion and a second, so I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote since I don't see much else. So is that all right? Mary, do you want to say something?
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right. So motion by Mark and a second by Mary to approve just the additional CARES funding spending plan. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. All those opposed?
No.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for the robust and thoughtful discussion. So again, when we get right down to maybe that November 9th date and there's other excess funding, we'll be coming back to council to let you know how much more can go back into the community. And I'm sure there'll be some more. I don't know how much, but we're doing our best. So. Okay. Thank you. Item E tonight, the main event, is the 2021 preliminary budget overview. As all of you that have been on council, which all of you have in budget processes before, we want to present to you the highlights of our 2021 budget. You have received your budget binders. The intent of tonight is to really go over that high level, and then we'll, of course, reconvene coming up in the following Wednesdays and answer questions and go through it in as much detail as the council would like to do. So that's what we want to do tonight, is just go through a kind of a quick overview of what you're going to find in that, hit on some of the highlights that we know that all of you like to ask specific things, and then we'll go from there. So Doug and I are going to do this together. I'll do the first few slides and then Doug will take over. So, here we are, October 7. We have our budget calendar that was published where we introduced the budget tonight. We always are very intent on being a mission-driven organization, and that when we're proposing budget, it's efficiency of our traditional municipal services to meet our mission. We also make sure that we're proposing a budget that follows financial policies that have been adopted by council and follow and fund the strategic goals that are laid out as we move through the years. And so we'll touch on that as well tonight. Next slide, Doug. The first thing, though, that I wanted to is just we're in a position to present a budget tonight for several reasons, but one of the largest reason is the savings that we're and decisions made for this year's budget due to the pandemic. Council knows these were really some tough decisions made early on, and I think that those decisions put us in a position better and stronger than some of the other municipalities or organizations that kind of took a wait and see approach. We were very fortunate that the revenue decline wasn't as sharp as we had anticipated, and we're lucky for that. But we did have that decline and did need to realize some savings. So I wanted to just touch really quickly on what the personnel in our city and the really hard work that all of our employees do. Those decisions are really what save significant funding. So employees that had been furloughed, whether that was laid off, which is a little below, but there were employees that were furloughed for a month, 2-3 months at a time. 56 hours of unpaid time for your non-represented employees and your Teamster employees. Resulted in a savings of about $301,000. That was 56 hours of pay that our employees did not receive. Police non-commissioned, we anticipate that we're settling their contract hopefully soon and realize some savings for them. We did have 11 layoffs of full-time employees, and we had part-time layoffs. So a total of $1.5 million in savings that came directly from personnel decisions. And moving into 2021, I think some people like to think that because they're tired of the pandemic that it doesn't exist anymore. And that isn't the case. And that's not any approach that you're going to find me taking when we're making decisions based on operations. We do not have a vaccine. And basically the virus is just the same as it was when it first came. So infection rates had declined. This morning, public health reported that we had 14 new cases over the weekend and 11 new cases just yesterday. So we're not out of the woods by any means. We have to plan for the effects of this as we move into 2021. And so our primary focus in the budget we'll present tonight is to maintain our basic services. Not a lot of extra stuff in here. So, all right, next slide. Our budget process, as you all know, is we have our departments develop their budgets. We have frontline employee input, zero-based, and they're asked that they need to meet goals, their service goals and their delivery goals from their budgets. Then the mayor and the director, we sit down and kind of go over that, have really innovative conversations, problem solving, lots of questions. We didn't do as many meetings this year simply because the directors were given very, very strict, specific guidance to come in with absolutely nothing new. They were told to eliminate training and things like that. And then now we come before mayor and council. Okay, one thing, and before I turn it over to Doug, is one thing we started to do a few years ago was really just quickly break down discretionary versus non-discretionary spending. You know, money that we literally just have to keep the lights on and keep those basic services going. And so the calculation in your budget that is before you that we'll start working on is 93%. I have that right, Doug, right? 93% of the expenditures that we're proposing are non-discretionary. That's salaries, wages, benefits, contracts that we must pay. And 7% is discretionary. And I use that in, we'll use air quotes around discretionary because that's things like overtime and paper and pens and very simple things. So it's an extremely conservative and tight budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to Doug to move forward on some of the highlights.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So overall, the citywide budget that we're proposing for the preliminary budget is $71 million. It's about $1 million over what it was last year. It's about a 1.5% increase. And I'll go over in more of the details on what that was, what that is from. As far as the governmental operating funds, we went down about $444,000 or a 1.2% decrease, down to $36,014,000. And then we are using the general fund balance reserve of $370,000, which will still, though, estimate our general fund balance at December 31st of 21 at $4.5 million or 17% of our reserve for our budget, which is higher than we have been for a while. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Excuse me. All right. As far as revenues go, our governmental operating funds are at $34.6 million. And that's about a $900,000 decrease from last year and this year's budget. 64% of that is taxes. And but overall, we're projecting about a $511,000 decrease in taxes for the city budget. Overall revenue is going up about $808,000, and there's a lot of things in there that make that up. We're looking at the GEMT revenues, about over $1.5 million that we have budgeted this year, and then some new things that I need to discuss with you is the managerial funds, about almost another $1 million. So those are the things that are causing the increase in our revenues. As far as the public safety and criminal justice components of our overall operational budget, about $22 million of that $36 million does pertain to public safety and criminal justice, or about 61%. You see again, there 61% of our governmental funds is going to that public safety aspect. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to the mayor.
Okay, so we mentioned how we want to budget things to address our strategic priorities, our strategic goals. And so, of course, our public can find that on our website. So I just thought I'd touch on a few things on how we're meeting that in the proposed budget before you. So first up is our infrastructure, and our goal there is to provide a high level of quality public facilities in a fiscally prudent manner. So here we want to have our continued vigilance in our facilities during COVID-19, making sure that they're safe, making sure we've got things in place when we do open up, say City Hall or our library, that we're making sure that we've got things for that. Modest general facilities maintenance continues. As you all know, we have a lot of facilities just to keep that maintenance going. So we have a modest amount of funding in there to continue those repairs as they come up. In our city shop, we've wanted to add 2 bays to our mechanic shop. You all know Gary and their crew actually literally work on vehicles outside on the ground in the rain. And so we're hoping to bring some concrete plans to you really shortly in the next week or two. ESCO's been working very diligently on trying to figure out that puzzle and how we're going to get there. We want to continue forward progress on the Mount Vernon Library Commons and our fire stations discussions that we've been having over the last year or two. Under healthy neighborhoods, we want to continue our work around our homelessness with working with Skagit County and the Department of Commerce grants. Council may remember we decided to go in together with the county, so we're working on hotel vouchers for that. But Commissioner Janicki is leading discussion on more shelter options. Housing code work, of course, continues. The community court, which was mentioned by Chief Kamek, we're actually having a quick presentation on that next week because we do have an allocation of some funding to support community court in this particular budget. So I'll wait maybe for next week to really kind of dive into what that means. House Bill 1406 funds, we started collecting that this year, little bits at a time, but next year, or even maybe by the end of this year, we'll see. We're hoping that we can have that allocated for eviction prevention support. And continued our decades-long commitment to community policing philosophy and service delivery and crime prevention in our neighborhoods. A good place for investment. We want to continue moving forward on the Mount Vernon Library Commons. We do have funding in that, a little bit more information after agenda items on that particular project, but we don't want to lose sight and keep taking incremental steps forward. Opportunities on investments. We have had lots of conversations from investors around that. Haven't necessarily seen that occur yet, but it's still an option. The tourism promotion area, which was worked on with the county, I think for almost 20 years, took effect. They had their first meeting this week. And so collection of that revenue starts in January. We do believe that that will promote tourism in the greater Skagit County, including the city of Mount Vernon. And our Little Mountains Skills Park and Trailhead, that will be a draw for folks that are coming to do mountain biking in Little Mountain Park. So we want to look at continuing and finishing up that project in its entirety. And under operations, significant technological upgrades are continuing. As you know, lots of folks working from home and all the things that are helping folks do business with the city on technology we just talked about, so that you'll see that there. HR is standing up NeoGov, which really helps in online job recruiting. It's a tool for folks that are seeking jobs, which will take a significant amount of load off our very small staffed HR department. So we're excited about that. Our public safety personnel peer-to-peer support program, something that I'm so excited, began work, as Chief said, last year, bring that all to fruition this year. We do have a reorganization of our library and our recreation staffing model, which we'll talk about. And then we're asking to convert the planning coordinator position, which is a full-time position, which was laid off, into a full-time planning position, technically a reclassification, and we can go into explaining why that makes a lot of sense. So next up is what's included in the budget. And I'll go back to Doug.
All right, so what is included is, one thing that's not included is no increase for property taxes. We're not requesting anything new for property taxes except for new construction. We have $100,000 in there right now for new construction. It also assumes a 5% reduction in sales tax from our 2019 actuals. We have GEMT used for capital equipment in 21, and then the addition of managerial accounts, which I'll get into in a little bit here, and go over that for $912,000. This is what those managerial accounts are for, is just basically a requirement from that new GASB statement number 84 that we kind of talked about during our audit for fiduciary funds. We have to now start budgeting for those. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. Also included is about $212,000 for some of our fixed or our non-discretionary expenditures, as we discussed earlier. And some of the things that you can see there is that Skagit 911 is going up to $520,000. It's about a $43,000 increase. Community court, which I believe the mayor is going to discuss, is about $35,000. State auditor is going up to $91,000, up $13,000. And then software maintenance that we have to maintain is going up $30,000. Voter registration is going up to $75,000, so that's going up about $20,000. And then in 21 is the first year that we will be paying annually. We made a prepayment for $200,000 on the YMCA contract. Now we need to, for the next 8 years, we'll be making these $50,000 payments. So just some of the things that are in there that has created some increases. And then some of the things that are unfunded. So ER&R contributions, except for the GEMT and the utilities, we don't have any ER&R contributions going in except for actual purchases that we plan on making for 2021. And then the fire station infrastructure projects, as you know, it's been discussed several times about different options, and I know we still need to discuss on what those options are going to be. And so right now, nothing's budgeted until we'll have a plan that is completed, and then we can do a budget amendment as needed for that. As the mayor mentioned earlier, also all non-essential travel has been excluded. The only travel that really exists in these budgets are for fire and police, as far as the essential training that they have to go to, and et cetera. Personnel, we are not requesting any new FTE requests. There has been a few reorganizations. Isaac in the library did some reorganizations in his staffing model to show some efficiencies, and there's about 4 part-time employees that are no longer going to be needed there. Director Berner in Parks has been doing some reorganization for her recreational staffing, which is going to create some savings and still being able to meet some of the goals and providing the services that are required there. And then we have 4 unfunded positions. These are positions that We're not asking it this year to get rid of these positions, but we aren't planning on hiring them, filling them in 2021. So they are not included in the budget. And then we will look at, for 22, we'll reassess things to see how things are looking. But those unfunded positions include one in the finance, utility customer services area, a recreation specialist, and then a CWP assistant supervisor, and then one full-time library assistant. And then, you know, this budget is, you know, we're presenting a balanced budget that meets all of our reserve policies. As you know, the general fund reserve policy is that we must have at least 15% reserves in there. And we are coming out at 17% at the end of 2021. And then parks, library, and streets, our policy says from 10 up to 15, a minimum of 10 up to 15%. And we are above those there at coming in about 16% in each one of those three too. So that's something we haven't seen in our budgets for a while. So hopefully we'll receive the revenues coming in as planned and monitor our expenditures to get to these amounts. You know, we still remain a challenge for the city is our discretionary funds. You know, right now our taxes still, I know we discuss this every year, but our taxes still don't even cover just the salaries and benefits that we have for our governmental funds. Total taxes come to about 22.2 million, and total salaries and benefits that rely on those taxes are over 25 million. So again, like I said, this is a challenge that we are gonna have to continue to look at and be aware of as we move forward with budgeting in future years. And then also, you know, just trying to figure out how we're gonna, what the economy is gonna do in 2021. I mean, there's just a lot of unknowns right there. You know, we are going to continue to try meeting our current needs with the growing needs of the city and operations with the revenues that we receive. You know, we have to look at the poverty rates. We do have healthcare cost increases this year, and then unemployment, which, you know, all of these can have direct effects on the sales, like tax revenues, et cetera. So this is things of the economy that we have to continue to watch out for. I know the last few things that have been coming out have been more on the positive side. So that's encouraging, but we'll just have to wait to see how things are going to pan out there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the ER&R, it's not funded through the general fund line items except for the finance purchases in 2021 without policy change. We'll continue doing this without policy change. As of right now, policy is that we will be making contributions to ER&R, and right now through this, you know, tight budget time, we don't have them in there, except again, except for the GEMT, the fire, and then also the utilities. And speaking of fire, and for the GEMT, we anticipate getting about $1.5 million in GEMT funding. Right now, and it's budgeted. We do have budgeted all of their fire's equipment purchases and in ER&R, and then also leaving some money in their options to build up a fund in there for future discussion for fire station capital projects, et cetera. This has been a big savings also to the general fund because we're no longer using general fund money to fund the ER&R for that they have. So we're pretty lucky and fortunate to have this GEMT money coming in. And then property tax discussion. So the levy rate is for 6 years in a row, the levy rate is projected to be decreasing. We have a bank capacity of about $745,000. And the implicit price deflator came in at under 1%. Normally, this is that 1% allowable amount that we're talking about. Right now, this year, the allowable amount is only at 0.602, which is 52,645. If council decided that that's something they wanted to do, but we're not projecting that in our budget right now. And then just showing a chart here on our levy rates, showing that we are at just historically low levels. We are under the $2 mark in 2021. One of the things last time when I gave a presentation on property tax revenues, I did not have any of the information from the counties. I did just receive that. I was projecting $3.95 billion in assessed value. It actually came in at over $4 billion. So that's why we were able to bring that rate down even a little further to that under $2 there. There was $41.9 million of new construction also. As you can see there, looking, our assessed value keeps going up. Our population is going up. I'm still have to work on our 2021 population. There's different resources have different amounts, so I apologize there. I'm right now, it's still sitting there at the same as 2020. So then our total, if this all came to fruition here, our total levy rate would go from 7.9 or basically 8 million to $8,110,000, and that's mainly just from new construction. So any questions on that before I move forward? Okay, and then our 2021, there's another graph here, just a graphic showing as our assessed value keep going up, our population keeps going up, and that is bringing that levy rate down. So that's all good news. I think did I miss a slide here? Oh, there we go. I'm sorry. So what are the next steps? So what we have right now in our tentative schedule is that next week we will go over some of the department budget discussions and talk about the public safety and public works. And then October 21st, we will continue on with those with the rest of the departments and go over capital projects. October 28th, I'll give an update on hotel motel funds and have a public hearing on our revenue sources and property tax and for 21 and possibly take council action on that aspect. And then November 2nd, we'll have copies of the budget available to the public. And then November 18th, a public hearing on the 2021 budget and hopefully adoption. So that's what the tentative schedule is at this point. If anybody has any questions or comments or anything on that, that's what we will move forward with.
There are some, oh, go ahead, Mark, sorry.
Oh, the only thing I was going to say is some of us received our budget books the other day and have had an opportunity to go through it a little bit. And while I've got some of my stickers posted in the book already, Doug, they're more questions, they're not changes. I will say since I've been on the council, we haven't seen a budget that has come in as close as this one. I've never seen us only using $370,000 for the fund balance. And I just really appreciate the mayor's efforts and your efforts going into this budget, knowing the circumstances in which we were under. And I think you've put together a very responsible budget. Like I said, there's probably a couple questions, but nothing that I would indicate as being changes thus far that I can project. So I just wanted to say thank you for the work that was put into this.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. And I know some of you have probably lots of questions. And so that's what those sticky notes are for in your binder, like Mark mentioned. And, you know, this is a tentative schedule. So as we go through, we want to make sure council, of course, is comfortable before your adoption. But, you know, we can go at your pace. And there are a few statutory hearings, you know, notices that we have to have. But other than that, we can go at your pace. So. Okay.
Okay.
Last step.
So the last thing I wanted to go over is I know you guys have probably already went through your budget binders and read them all cover to cover, but I was just gonna kind of just go through a little bit of things just to highlight. I'll do it very briefly here, but if you have your books there, I was just looking at the summary. This is probably has the most information as far as the of overview of what's in the 2021 budget. So on page 1 there, you can see that the total city is at $71 million with governmental funds at $36 million. I'm not going to go through all these, but what I would want to point out to you is on page 5, where we're talking about all the different funds that we have, is that there used to be one on the very, very bottom of page 5. It was fiduciary funds. This is the one that now it's called managerial funds. And this is for the accounts that we hold assets for the city as a trustee capacity. And with the new GASB 84 that came out, we have to include those in our budget and in our financial reporting. And so that's what bringing those up in here. That's what I combined all that into the Fund 600 series managerial funds, and that's about a $912,000 budgeted item. So that's almost $1 million of that increase in our overall budget is, that's a big aspect of it in there. So if you have questions on that, please feel free to talk to me about that. And then I'd like to go to page 11, where we're talking about the fund balance reconciliation. And looking at the green column, the very bottom of the green column, or that whole column there, I should say, has the fund balances of the actual fund balances of December 31, 2019. The blue is this current year of 21 revenues and 20 estimated revenues and estimated expenditures, which brings our fund balance in that dark blue column all the way down. And then with the numbers that are presented in this budget for the revenues and expenditures for 21, that shows where we are there. So if you look at the short columns, purple ones, that's where our ending fund balance is going to projected to be at the end of 21 at that 17%, 16, and 16. So we can go into more information in there, but this page here really kind of gives all the information from the revenues and expenditures to each fund, and then where we're going to be with that fund reserve. Moving on just to the revenues. The revenue section has just a few charts there for overall, and then you can find further on in there the projections for every single fund in there. Personnel tab, in the personnel tab, kind of just wrote up some of the things that were happening in there as far as the reorganizations that happened that are creating some reclassification of positions, and then the positions that are not funded. And so that's why in some of these graphs after that, like on page 2 and 3 in that section, you'll see where we're projecting sometimes 231 positions and sometimes at 235 positions. So if we're talking about anything funded, it's 231, and then if they're talking about just total employees that we currently are allowed, that's where you see the 235. And then let's skip to the capital projects. I'm not going to talk about that, but that's kind of a lot more detail of our capital projects summary for equipment replacements, general facilities, transportation, parks, and utilities. And then behind that first sheet kind of gives more detail. And these are the dollar amounts that match with the individual budgets that are in there. And then the rest of them are just our departments summaries. And I'm just looking at if you look at the attorney tabs, they all follow the same information. So page 1, there on the attorney tab, you have a narrative which kind of talks about an overview and sometimes and their goals and if there's different measures that they want to talk about, that you'll find that information in there. And then on page 2, you will see kind of a summary of their overall budget where I just kind of put together highlighted changes of their budget. Page 3 has their actual line item by expense code of those budgets and comparison to the 2019 actual, the 20 estimate, the 20 budget, and then the changes from the budget in there. And then following that section, you'll have individual explanations for every single one of those budgeted line items. So if you wanted to see what was all included in some of those line items, you can find it in there. And then on page 5, page 6, we'll talk about just the employees that are in there, the classifications and of each employee that's in there, and then following that would be the part-time employees. So that's a format that you'll find behind each of those tabs, and then if you have any questions with any of that, please feel free to let me know. And then just the last thing I would say is there's towards the end there or the middle there, I guess there's a tab for other funds. That's where you're going to find all of the other funds that are included in this budget, including the other managerial funds there. And the first page there's actual table of contents there, so you can go through easier to find those. So that's all I really wanted to say about that. So unless there's any questions, that's all I have.
Okay, we will look forward to some robust budget discussions starting next Wednesday. Any questions for Doug, though, on the binder? And if not, if you can always, of course, call him directly and myself. Okay, great. Thank you. Moving on to item F tonight, this is for the good of the order. And so I want to give the floor to Councilmember Erin Moberg at this time.
Thank you, Jill. All right. Well, the past few weeks have been, without question, the most emotionally trying days that my family and I have faced. Recently, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and it has left my family searching for answers to questions that we never thought we would have to ask. I do start radiation tomorrow and chemotherapy tonight, actually. I plan to keep a positive outlook, and I hope for great results. Through all of this, I'm finding that my focus has been narrowing in on the vital and essential aspects of my life, my family, my loved ones, and my health. Serving and representing the residents of Ward 1, sorry, just gonna get emotional, and all of Mount Vernon as a city council member has been an honor and a privilege that I have never taken for granted. I wanna thank each council member and resident who have entrusted me with this position. I was and I remain truly humbled by your support. I know without question that the right thing for me to do for my family and for this city is to resign from my position as city council member effective immediately. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council and city staff for all the ways you have helped me to become a better council member. And thank you again to the residents of Mount Vernon for this incredible opportunity to serve you on the council. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Erin. I know that was tough for you. So I know that council may want to say a few words, but before they do, I'm going to grab the floor. You have served with honor and commitment and really very transparent commitment to the city to make things better. And so we are so grateful for your time on council. What a great example that you have set. Erin, our Councilmember Moberg, was appointed and started on January 1st of 2019. So she's been with us almost 2 years. She serves Ward 1 here in the city. She served on the Skagit Transit Board, jumped right into that. And she served on our Left 1 Disability Board and also our Public Safety Committee Chair, which is an absolutely fantastic job. And so because we're not in person, I can't do this in person. So I'm going to hold up. We're going to get this to you. This is our very special custom block print from the city of Mount Vernon. And so we'll make sure that you get that to memorialize your wonderful service to the city of Mount Vernon. So
thank you.
We'll do that. And then I'll see if any council members would like to say anything as well.
So Erin, it's I have to say it's been a privilege serving with you. It was really inspiring to see you come on the council and jump right in and to watch your growth during the short time that you were with us on council. I just feel really blessed to have gotten to know you and to serve with you. And I want you to know that my family will be praying for your family. We'll keep you in our thoughts and prayers. And I wish you the best.
Thank you, Mark. That means a lot.
Is there any other council members who would like to say anything? I know it's emotional. So go ahead, Mary.
I'll try.
Okay.
Sorry. Since I found out about this, Erin, this has been I've gone through so many stages. I'm sure you have too. I'm just so proud of you. And I've really, oh, Kali, I'm sorry. I've enjoyed getting to know you. You're a great person, and you're going to beat this. My family is praying for you too. If you need anything, please, please let me know. And that's the best I can do. We'll text later.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Can I go?
Sure. Go ahead, Melissa.
Aaron, you are one of the kindest, sweetest people I have had the privilege to get to know and work with. I too am so proud of you. It has been an honor to serve with you. My family is praying for you and your family. This news is heartbreaking. If I could give you a big hug right now, I would.
Thank you, Melissa. That means a lot. I'll hug you later.
Gary, did you want to say something?
Yes, I do.
All right. You unmuted, so.
Yeah. Aaron, I'm so sorry for the struggle you guys are dealing with your family, and we think of you often, and we will be praying that things will go well for your treatments. And having to sit between you and Melissa has not been easy over the years, or the last couple of years. You both have a pretty wicked sense of humor, and it's been a struggle at times having to sit between you two. But I'm gonna miss you on council, and like Melissa said, your sweet personality, but to me, it was a very quiet, strong leadership that you brought to our council, and I'm really going to miss that. And again, we'll be praying for you guys.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate all the prayers from everybody.
Okay. Any other council member? Okay. Oh, Iris, do you want to say something? Go ahead.
I'm gonna try.
Okay.
Because this is not easy for me, Aaron. I just remember the first day when I met you, and you came into the table in the Woods Coffee. And since I met you, I just knew what kind of person you are. And in a short time, I have the privilege to know so many faces from you. And you are so kind and so well with families and children and babies and adults and with all of us in City Council. Then I am really, it's painful to know what are you going through, but you are in my thoughts every day and in my prayers, and I am here for anything you need. Please just text me or let me know what can I do, and I'll be knocking at your door because you are part of my family, you are part of my heart, and I just keep you inside of me because we've been through together for many things in this community. In a very short time, you got to know what I am doing in the community, and just to have your support by my side, it's been so grateful. And I know you're going to fight this, and probably right now we are suffering with you, but we have to be strongly in faith, and this is going to be in a better day. Everything happened for a reason, I know, and I think you're going to be, I really believe this is going to be for a good for you and the family. You are in my heart.
Thank you, Iris. That means a lot.
Richard, you unmuted. I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
Yeah, no, I also wanted to say something. It's hard to, I mean, everybody said so many nice things well, Aaron. I wanted to thank you for, being always willing to sit down and share your thoughts and your time and your perceptions of this city. I've not been in Mount Vernon as long as most of you, but I've talked to a lot of people, and I'm just constantly amazed how many people are like, oh, Erin, oh, of course, I've known her forever. She's the best. You know, so everybody really wishes you in this town, you know, the best. And if there's anything we do for you or your family, let us know.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for the flowers. They were perfect.
Okay. Well, again, we're grateful for Erin's service on council, and so
thank you, everyone. I loved being on council with you all, and thank you to the city staff because you're all so wonderful.
Great. People at this point might want to know what would be next after this, and so Councilmember Moberg will be resigning as of today. And I will ask to work with our Mayor Pro Tem currently, which is Councilmember Melissa Beaton, and we'll work on a process that's acceptable to all the council members. According to RCW, we've got about 90 days to fill that spot. It would be current qualifications, you know, registered voter, residency requirement is really important, especially to live in the particular ward that Councilmember Moberg serves, and that's Ward 1. So more information to the public will come after that. So, all right. I don't have anything else for the good of the order tonight, but I will ask our city attorney if there's a need for an executive session.
Yes, Mayor, there is. And prior to that, I just want to say on behalf of staff, since staff has an ability to chime in, I've been a public attorney for 18 years representing the city of Mount Vernon. Councilmember Moberg, I find that you have served admirably, and it's been a privilege to represent you as a constituent member. You've shown intelligence, patience, and a strong moral compass, and the citizens here were well served by your tenure. Now take care and take care of your family. If you need anything from me in my office, give me a call.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
And with that, I would ask the city council to enter into an executive session to discuss with legal counsel representing the city enforcement action, litigation, or potential litigation to which the city is or is likely to become a party when public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in either adverse legal or adverse financial consequence to the city, and to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of increased price, estimated time 45 minutes, no action after.
Okay, thank you. We'll be adjourned into executive session at 7:56 with no final action afterwards. So I'll just ask council to stay on the Zoom, and we'll get ready for that with TV 10 helping us out.